Forgot to invite Molly, the cousin we once excluded, to my wedding dinner. Now past memories resurface painfully. I'm the oldest of 6 cousins on my mom's side, 5 boys and, right in the middle, the second youngest, Molly. Every summer, we'd all converge at our grandparents' place by a beautiful lake. Those weeks were wild, boating, fishing, hiking, just being kids on the loose. Looking back, I'll admit we were absolute jerks to Molly. At that age, we thought it was cool to leave the girl out, ignore her, and run off the second she tried to join us. Unless our grandparents insisted, we barely gave her the time of day. Eventually, Molly stopped trying, and I can't say I blamed her. I still remember when I was 17, Molly was about 11 then. I stumbled on her one afternoon, hidden away and crying. Molly was always tough as nails, so seeing her like that stopped me in my tracks. After some coaxing, she broke down and told me how she hated coming to the lake with us. She'd been getting bullied at school about her looks, she wasn't ugly, just a little awkward, and coming to the lake just meant more exclusion, more of the same treatment she got at school. Hearing it made my stomach drop. Truth is, none of us actually disliked Molly, we'd just been playing along with some unspoken no girls allowed bullcrap. Right then and there, I apologized and swore I'd make it up to her. I made sure she came along for everything, and if any of the boys tried to freeze her out, I didn't let it slide. That summer turned into one of our best. Molly had a blast, and by the next year, she was just part of the crew. After I headed off to college, my brothers told me they kept the tradition, no more leaving Molly out, and they felt terrible about the way we'd all treated her for so long. Fast forward a few years, life got busy, and the whole family only really saw each other once or twice a year. But on Facebook, I'd catch glimpses of Molly's new world. She finished high school, landed a job, made friends, she seemed happy, and that made me genuinely glad. Now, here's where everything got complicated. I'm getting married this weekend to an incredible woman. We'd spent a year planning the wedding, and of course both of our extended families were on the guest list. For the rehearsal dinner, my parents were hosting and wanted to keep it small. Working it through with my fiancé, the guest list stacked up: immediate family, bridal party, aunts, uncles, but we capped out at the venue's maximum. Then we realized there were 3 out-of-town cousins under 15 who would be stranded in hotel rooms while their parents attended, so we added them. The venue wasn't thrilled but agreed to make the exception, so all seemed good. That all blew up last Sunday. We hosted a casual get-together since many relatives had already arrived to turn the week into a vacation. Weddings were the main topic, and soon people were chatting about the rehearsal dinner. Suddenly, I realized what I'd overlooked. We'd managed, purely by accident, to invite every cousin on both sides, except Molly. My fiancé's 2 younger cousins were included, her older cousins were bridesmaids, and on my side my best man was one cousin, my brothers were in, and the youngest cousin, at 13, made the cut for being under 15. Out of the 6 cousins in my family, the only person left out was Molly. My stomach sank. She didn't say a word, she just quietly slipped out before I could catch her and explain. I could only imagine how it looked to her, all the old wounds of being excluded, now as an adult. I confessed everything to my mom, who brushed it off, saying, she'll get over it. But I couldn't shake how wrong it felt, neither could my fiancé. We each felt like absolute crap. We called the venue, desperate for a solution, but with us already over the limit and the dinner set in 4 days, they said we'd have to switch to a bigger room, for $600 more. There was no way we could afford that. My fiancé pointed out that even if we invited Molly as is, there wouldn't be a seat or food for her. She'd end up the odd one out, standing alone or squeezed in, with no meal, and, more than anything, she'd know she was an afterthought. Now I'm haunted by that little girl at the lake, wishing I hadn't let history repeat itself, even by accident. And I don't know how to make it right. Update 1. I accidentally left my cousin Molly out of the invites for my rehearsal dinner, while inviting all of my other cousins. That made me the asshole in this situation and, worst of all, I hurt her feelings. I spent days racking my brain, trying to figure out how to apologize to Molly for my mistake and how to make it up to her. I was basically already rehearsing my groveling, ready to give up my own plate at the rehearsal so she could come, so she wouldn't feel left out. I even started bouncing ideas off of my fiancé on whether I should take Molly out for lunch a few times after returning from our honeymoon. I really wanted to fix things between us. So, while all this was weighing on me, I was out running some last-minute errands on Wednesday. I had to pick up my tux. When I walked back into the house, I found my fiancé sitting comfortably on the sofa, chatting and laughing with Molly as though they were old friends. The wild thing was, Emily and Molly had only just met at my parents' get-together on Monday. Emily stood up as soon as she saw me and, completely out of left field, announced, so I told Molly the truth about the rehearsal dinner, and that when I was going through the guest list to bring the numbers down, I didn't recognize her name. My jaw must have dropped. Emily told Molly that she'd made the mistake, that she hadn't realized Molly was my cousin, and that she was the reason Molly didn't get an invite. She also told her how terrible I'd felt once I realized my screw-up, and how I was planning on inviting Molly anyway and even giving up my own plate just to make sure she could come. But Emily didn't stop there. She actually called the venue and, in her own words, went bridezilla to ensure Molly got a seat. This is the most easygoing woman I know, and hearing about her going anything Zilla was hilarious, and honestly, I'm almost sorry I missed seeing it happen. On top of that, Emily invited Molly to join her and the bridesmaids for their hair and nail appointments, apologizing for her mistake. Honestly, if I hadn't already had a whole wedding planned, I probably would have eloped with Emily right then and there. Molly walked over to me, gave me a huge hug, and told me she appreciated just how far I was willing to go to fix things, but told me, point blank, to quit being such a whiner and enjoy your wedding. The rehearsal dinner and next day's brunch went off perfectly. I was so relieved and happy to have the entire family there, and I finally allowed myself to just enjoy it all. Molly didn't end up going along with Emily and her bridal party for the hair and nails. She didn't want to intrude, but she was deeply grateful for the invite. The wedding itself was everything I could have hoped for. I married the most incredible person I've ever known, and everyone had a blast at the reception. Toward the end of the night, I finally confessed everything to Molly, because some part of me still felt guilty for the original mistake. She looked me in the eye and asked if putting the blame on Emily had been her idea. I admitted it was, and that I had no clue she was planning all of this, but I was completely serious about giving up my own plate if that's what it took to include Molly. She just laughed and called me an idiot, but said, "You picked a good one." She forgave me right then and there, completely, though I'm not sure I deserved it. As the reception wound down and the adults and younger kids left, I asked Molly if she'd be coming to the after party at our apartment. She just grinned and told me Emily had already invited her, and there was no way she would miss it. And she kept her word. She came, we all hung out together drinking, playing board games till about 4 a.m., and she absolutely destroyed me at both Settlers and King of Tokyo. In the end, everything worked out even better than I could have possibly planned. Update 2. So, it turns out Princess Maleficent Banana Hammock, the first of her name, Queen of Tokyo, Catan, and Avalon, Lady of the Six Cousins and Protector of the Realm, the Unbothered, Mother of Pokemon, Breaker of Chains, Reddit. Yesterday, she called me out, absolutely livid, because, thanks to the sheer number of people engaging with my post, it showed up right on her front page. The moment she called, I could hear the frustration in her voice. Her exact words? "Dude, did you seriously name me after your mom's cat? From now on, whenever I refer to her, I must use her requested title. Nothing less will do for Her Highness." And, for the record, she made it explicitly clear, she does not, under any circumstances, accept internet proposals on threads that feature her being named after a household pet. Lesson learned, Princess Maleficent Banana Hammock demands respect, both online and off. Update 3. Princess Maleficent Banana Hammock called me again, but this time she wasn't mad, she was plotting. "You still owe me a rehearsal dinner," she said, completely deadpan. Before I could ask what on earth that meant, she told me to pack a hoodie, tell Emily to wear sneakers, and meet her at the lake at 5 p.m. Sunday. We were supposed to leave for our mini honeymoon Monday morning, so I figured, fine. One last detour through childhood before disappearing into married people bliss. When we pulled up to my grandparents' place, I realized Molly had turned the dock into a budget Versailles. There were string lights everywhere, a Bluetooth speaker playing the same soft jazz my grandpa used to put on when he fell asleep in his chair, and a long picnic table dragged to the edge of the water with paper plates spray-painted gold. Every plate had a hand-lettered place card. Aunt Lisa was Lady Brings Tupperware and Gossip, my best man was Sir Perpetual Late Arrival, Emily got the Magnanimous, and mine said Exiled Duke of Forgetfulness. The last seat, dead center, had a card that read Her Royal Brilliance, Maleficent, Breaker of Chains and Myths about Girls Being Bad at Board Games. She'd even hot-glued rhinestones to a plastic fork like it was a scepter. She'd roped in half the family. My grandparents, glowing. My brothers, already smirking. My mom looked sheepish in a way I've never seen. She gave me a quick squeeze and later, when the chaos had settled, pulled Molly into a proper hug and said, "I'm sorry I brushed it off. I was wrong." Molly squeezed back without theatrics and said, "We're good," like she was stamping a pardon with a royal seal. Dinner was all Molly. She'd picked up takeout from the little lakeside place with the crab cakes we used to split when we were broke teenagers, and she presented me with a ridiculous trophy, a literal dinner plate, spray-painted gold, with "for services to the crown" scrawled in puffy paint and a tiny plastic cat superglued to the rim. "Your plate," she announced, and the table howled. "You may keep your head." I tried to make a joke and found out my voice had turned into gravel. I don't cry easily, but the dock got real misty right then. After we ate, my grandmother disappeared inside and came back with an old shoebox I recognized. It was the lake's greatest hits, sun-faded Polaroids, photos of us with fish held at arm's length to make them look bigger, a shot of my grandpa asleep with a paperback on his chest. Tucked near the bottom was a photo I didn't know existed. 17-year-old me on the steps of the boathouse, sitting next to an 11-year-old Molly with a red face and wet eyes, her head leaning into my shoulder. No pose. Just caught in the middle of it. On the back, my grandma had written, "For when you forget." I swear the lights reflecting on the water started doing that wobbly thing specifically to mess with me. Then Molly clinked her glittered fork scepter against her glass. "Royal decree," she said. "Tonight we play a game where the rules don't change halfway through. We include everyone. And we don't let Uncle Tom be Merlin because he lies even when he's telling the truth." That kicked off the most chaotic round of Avalon in family history. Emily, who had never played at the lake before, proceeded to take us all apart like a watch. My uncle absolutely lied about not being Merlin. Molly caught him in 30 seconds. He sputtered, she bowed, and the crown stayed exactly where she always keeps it. At one point, Emily leaned over and whispered, "I love your family," which is right up there with "I do" on the list of sentences that make your ribcage feel too small. I told her, I think they just got bigger, and she kissed my cheek and stole 2 of my resource cards in the next round because marriage is compromise. As the sun dropped behind the trees, Molly pulled out one last thing from under the table, a cheap, sparkly tiara. "I'm supposed to be above theatrics," she said, putting it on with exaggerated solemnity, "but the cat asked me to accept in her honor." Someone had printed out a picture of my mom's cat and taped it to a popsicle stick like a medieval standard, and my grandfather waved it around like he was leading a charge. It was ridiculous and perfect. We stayed on that dock until the moon was high. We told old stories that somehow didn't turn into weaponized nostalgia, and we made new ones. My mom apologized to me, too, for her "she'll get over it" comment. I told her she didn't owe me that as much as she owed Molly, and she said she'd already said her piece and was going to back it up. Watching the 2 of them trade recipes and dates for a brunch next month felt like someone had gone into an old house and opened a stuck window. Before we left, Molly slid her arm through mine and walked me out to the end of the dock. "I'm not mad anymore," she said, the exact same voice she used at the wedding when she called me an idiot. "But you don't get to forget again. Not because I need you to remember I exist, but because I like watching you realize you're not 17 anymore." I told her that sounded like a curse. She grinned. "It's a blessing with bad timing," she said. Emily and I drove home with the golden plate buckled into the backseat like a toddler. In the morning, there was a group text waiting with a photo of my grandpa wearing the tiara while he watered the tomatoes. Molly had changed the chat name to The Realm and gave me the title Court Jester, Logistics. She gave Emily Prime Minister. When I typed back that I objected on constitutional grounds, she sent me a selfie from the lake with a tiara tipped over one eye and said, "Overruled." We left for our honeymoon a few hours later, and when we checked into the hotel, I unpacked that stupid plate and stood it up on the dresser. Emily caught me doing it, rolled her eyes, and said, "Of course you did." Then she took a photo and sent it to The Realm. The typing bubbles popped up immediately, and 3 seconds later my phone buzzed with Molly's decree: "By order of Her Majesty, consider yourself forgiven, forever, subject to future teasing." Update 4. We got home from the mini honeymoon, dropped our bags, and found a heavy envelope on the doormat with a wax seal that was, on closer inspection, a hot glue blob pressed with a quarter and dusted in glitter. The return address said, in calligraphy that was absolutely Sharpie, "The Realm." Emily looked at me like, of course. I cracked it and a shower of rhinestones hit my shoes. Inside was a summons. By order of Her Royal Brilliance, Maleficent, etc. Court is convened this Friday at sundown. Attire, comfortable. Footwear, swift. The court jester, Logistics, will present himself prepared to be ridiculous. It also said bring the golden plate. Friday at sundown we walked into my aunt's backyard and straight into a Renaissance fair if Party City had an all-called delusions of grandeur. Molly had dragged a card table under the maple tree and draped it with my grandma's crocheted tablecloth. The plastic tiara was perched on the back of a lawn chair like a crown on a throne. A hula hoop hung from a branch as the Great Seal. The photo of my mom's cat was taped to a broom handle and propped up like a banner nobody asked for but everyone needed. Everyone was there. My grandparents, comfortable on a bench dragged from the porch. My mom with a Tupperware of deviled eggs that could have been used as currency in some countries. My brothers, my uncle, already pleading his innocence with no charges announced. Place cards again. My cousin Ben was Minister of Questionable Alibis. Emily got promoted to Prime Minister, with actual powers. Mine read Court Jester, Logistics, on probation. Molly tapped a wooden spoon against a mason jar, the royal gavel, and made a face like she was about to laugh and refused to. "The court will come to order," she said. "We are here to adjudicate old nonsense and ratify new nonsense." The nonsense, it turned out, was a proper trial. I was the first case. Charge, attempted forgetfulness with aggravating circumstances. I pleaded guilty on all counts and offered the golden plate as evidence. Molly took it solemnly, turned it in her hands, and made me swear I had buckled it into the rental car like a toddler. I swore. She nodded once, satisfied. "Very well," she said. 3 conditions and you walk out a free man. 1. Demonstrate that the jester remembers the birthdays of the realm. Emily, traitor to some but obviously loyal to the crown, had already made flashcards. I got through every date with only one stumble on Uncle Tom, who claimed the calendar was lying, and was permitted to keep my head. 2. Molly said. "Draft the charter." She pointed to an easel set up near the grill. There was butcher paper taped to it and a fat marker. "The first royal rehearsal," Molly read, "shall henceforth be held annually at the lake, or failing that, anywhere with enough flat surface for a board and enough light to see each other's faces." Her eyes flicked to mine for half a second. I wrote, hand shaking a little more than a marker requires, "Include everyone. Rules don't shift mid-game. No one gets over it, we get through it." I underlined through. My grandmother squeezed Grandpa's hand like she was releasing a bird she'd been holding too tightly. 3. Molly said, and this one came out softer. Choose someone to include right now who isn't already here. There was this moment where my brain, which usually chases formal solutions like a dog that only knows how to fetch old shoes, looked up and saw the simplest thing. I pulled out my phone and FaceTimed my cousin Kara, the one on my dad's side who couldn't make the wedding because she's an ICU nurse and had been on nights for 2 weeks. She answered in scrubs from a break room with vending machines that looked like they'd lived through 3 administrations. I introduced her to the realm. The realm raised cups to a little screen. My grandma tilted the phone so Kara could see the maple tree and the hula hoop and the ridiculous cat standard. My mom said, on speaker, "Honey, tell me when your next Sunday off is, I'm coming to you," and wrote it on the butcher paper under standing orders. "Case dismissed," Molly said, banging the spoon. The rest of court was chaos in a way that felt like breathing finally went back to automatic. Uncle Tom was formally barred from playing Merlin for 1 calendar year and made to teach the teenagers resistance tactics. My mother stood up from the bench, asked for the floor, and apologized again, this time without italics. "I'm sorry I told him you'd get over it. I should have said, we won't let it happen again," she said, and she looked right at Molly and didn't look away. Verdict: she hosts the first royal brunch, with recipes submitted by acclamation and veto power held by the realm to prevent raisins where they don't belong. Then my grandfather stood, which made the entire backyard go quiet like somebody turned the volume down 2 clicks. He disappeared inside and came back with an old whistle on a frayed cord, boat whistle, the one we used to fight over to call each other in from the water. He held it for a second, thumb worrying the dent near the mouthpiece I recognized from a summer where it took a heroic dive off the dock. He didn't make a speech. He walked up, looped it over Molly's head, and said, "You steer." Molly didn't cry. Molly also very conspicuously inspected the maple leaves for a solid 20 seconds while everyone pretended suddenly to have pollen allergies. Grandpa sat back down, leaned his shoulder into Grandma's, and they shared a look that belonged to people who already knew the rest of the story and were happy to watch it in reruns. After court, we ate in the kind of loud way that makes the neighbors rethink their fence. Emily slipped into Prime Minister mode and coordinated next month's lake weekend before desserts hit the table. I was caught calculating cooler capacity when a hand shot up from the bench. "Point of order," Grandpa said, eyes very bright. "Your grandmother and I have been talking. That is the prologue to rearranged furniture and life decisions in our family. The house is a lot. The stairs don't get shorter. We're going to rent it out next summer, a few weekends here and there, to pay for repairs. That means it won't always be ours exactly when we want it." You could feel the dock tilt in everyone's chest. It wasn't tragic, just truth. Molly didn't rush to fill the space. She looked at the whistle. She looked at the butcher paper. She walked over, clicked the marker, and wrote, "Wherever. Whenever. Together." Then she drew the world's worst crown around it. My mom laughed through her nose in that way she does when she's trying not to fog her glasses. My uncle saluted the crown like it outranked his mortgage. It was such a small line, and it picked the house up off its foundations and turned it into a map. We played one game before dusk chased us inside. It was a quick round of King of Tokyo that wasn't quick and wasn't quiet. Molly knocked me out first by feeding Emily energy cubes like a warlord handing out bread at a parade. She bowed after. I bowed back. Somewhere in there, I realized the knot I'd been carrying, the one that lived between the version of me who sat on a boathouse step with a crying kid and the version who left her off a spreadsheet, had slipped. Before we left, Molly pulled me aside behind the maple tree where we used to dare each other to climb higher. "Consider your probation lifted," she said. Then she flicked the golden plate with her finger so it chimed. "But just so you don't get bored, I'm upgrading your title." She handed me a new card she'd obviously made during court and hidden like a magician. It said, "Lord Rememberer, Keeper of Extras." On the back, in tiny script, she'd written, "Pack the spare charger, bring the extra chair. Add one more plate." When we got home, Emily propped the golden plate on a bookshelf we both pretend is organized and set the new card in front of it. My phone buzzed. The realm had a fresh decree. It was a photo of my grandfather at the kitchen table with the tiara on, a pen in his hand, filling out a calendar. The caption was from Molly, "By order of Her Majesty, the first royal rehearsal is the last Saturday of July. Attendance mandatory, pants optional if over swim trunks. Update 5. The first royal rehearsal tried to drown and then learned to drive. Last Saturday of July showed up in a sky the color of a bruise. I had the trunk packed like a relief convoy, folding chairs, bug spray, extra chargers, 10,000 napkins, a roll of tape so fat it had its own weather system. Emily had her Prime Minister binder with tabs. We were already out the door when my phone buzzed with a message from my mom. "Bad news, house is rented this weekend. Also, radar looks angry." 5 minutes later, my aunt chimed in with a photo of the dock under a ceiling of thunderheads, and you could practically hear the oarlocks complaining. I stood there in the driveway staring at the sky like I could negotiate with it. Before I could, a text from Molly hit the realm chat, "Charter clause activated. Wherever. Whenever. Together. Court jester, logistics, pick a flat place where people can see each other's faces. We're 40 minutes from the city." Kara, the ICU cousin whose calendar looks like it's trying to win, was on nights and had already said she'd be missing the lake. I called her. "We have a problem," I said. Or we have an opportunity with a parking structure. She laughed the kind of laugh that lives on the edge of a yawn. Top deck is empty after 7. Security hates fun and I'm on break at 8:15. Emily, listening in, mouthed, "Give me 10 minutes," and went full Prime Minister, called the hospital, got connected to someone whose title was 5 words long and contained facilities, and somehow produced an email that said, in essence, if you bring no alcohol, leave no trash, and are gone by 10, we will look the other way while you decorate the roof of a concrete cube. Molly sent out a pin. The realm became a caravan. By the time we rolled onto the top deck, the storm had veered east and left behind the kind of air that remembers rain. The skyline looked like somebody had lined up all the rules and put lights in them. I popped the trunk and the realm unloaded like a pit crew. Grandma took the folding chair with the soft seat. Grandpa supervised the placement of the cooler with the gravitas of a general finding high ground. My mom tucked deviled eggs into the shade of the cat standard, which flapped proudly from a borrowed traffic cone like we were staking a claim on the moon. Emily taped down extension cords to nowhere because she'd brought battery packs, of course she had. Molly chalked a crooked crown the size of a kiddie pool onto the concrete and planted the tiara on the back of a lawn chair that became the throne. She handed me a new card without looking. Lord Rememberer, Keeper of Extras, Quartermaster of Contingencies. I'm not done, she said. You keep leveling up when you annoy me. Security showed up because of course they did. A guy with a buzz cut and a face like he'd seen every version of this and hated all of them walked over just as Grandpa hoisted the broomhandle cat banner with a flourish. Emily stepped forward and held up the email like it was a passport. He read. He looked at the tiara. He looked at Molly holding a wooden spoon like it was a gavel. He looked at the golden plate shining like a very silly sun. No booze, out by 10, he said. He paused, then added, deadpan, Your Majesty, and walked away. Molly didn't even let her smile all the way out, she just inclined her head like she was knighting him in her mind. At 8:17, the automatic doors at the end of the roof hiccuped open and Kara jogged out in clogs and scrubs, badge flipped, hair up. She stopped dead like she'd run into glass. Her hand went to her mouth. Then she was in the middle of us, and the way my grandmother cupped her face and kissed her forehead would have melted a bigger, meaner hospital. Molly bestowed a headlamp tiara, no candle laws broken, and announced, by edict, Kara is now the night watch, keeper of alarms and breaker of vending machines. Kara bowed, headlamp beam bobbing like a lighthouse. We didn't try to pretend it was the lake. We leaned hard into what it was. The wind tugged at paper crowns and carried the smell of somebody else's dinner from 3 decks down. The city hummed. We played speed rounds that fit between pages in Kara's shift. Emily set up a board of codenames on the cooler, cards held in place with tape and bottle caps, and Kara wiped the floor with us in 2 turns, saying sterile like it contained 7 clues and an insult. Uncle Tom opened his mouth to volunteer to be Merlin for a quick Avalon, and Molly didn't even look up. Hospital rules, she said. No lying in the building. You may be the minister of obvious truths. He sulked for exactly 1 grape's worth of time and then threw himself into calling out the score like an announcer who keeps forgetting he's not on TV. At some point, a nurse from another unit drifted over in scrubs patterned with tiny whales, drawn by the smell of deviled eggs and the sound of my grandfather whistling under his breath. She hovered a polite distance away. Kara waved her in without ceremony and introduced her as Maria. Molly slid a plate into Maria's hands like it was always meant to be there and said, "You're now Duchess of 10-minute breaks. Eat." Maria sat on the edge of the chalk crown with us and told a story about a patient's family bringing in 6 dozen tamales at 2 a.m. Emily scribbled tamales under standing orders on the back of an envelope because she didn't bring the easel, but she will next time, I know it. It was not quiet, but it was that kind of contained loud that understands where it is. When Kara's pager chirped, she stood, sighed in a way you can only hear if you're sitting very close, and touched the golden plate with 2 fingers like it could lend her something. I have to go back, she said. 5 minutes? Molly held out the wooden spoon. By decree, she said, solemn as a cartoon, we will rehearse how to be here when you leave and still be here when you get back. We watched Kara's headlamp tiara bob away into the elevator and then we talked like we were leaving a line open. Grandpa got up, slow, took the whistle from around his neck, and looked at the edge of the roof like he could see the lake if he squinted. He didn't blow it. He pinched the dent by the mouthpiece with his thumb. Good sound travels, he said, so soft you had to lean in. He looped it back over his head. Molly didn't cry, and neither did I, because we were in public and also because the roof breeze insisted on drying everyone's eyes immediately like a jerk. When Kara came back, she had a smear of tape on her forearm and a grin that meant somebody finally fell asleep. We squeezed in a tiny round of sushi go because it's quick and nobody can cheat without being caught by a neighbor's fork. She won. She took the cat banner and marched it in a small circle like a parade of one. Maria snapped a photo. Grandpa insisted on taking a Polaroid with my grandmother's old camera that he'd smuggled into the tote bag like a heist, and the picture came out with a skyline behind us, crown chalk under our feet, and Kara in the center, headlamp caught mid-flare. Molly shook it gently and tucked it into the shoebox she'd brought because of course the shoebox traveled with us. On the back she wrote, for when the late clock's in. We were off the deck by 9:55 because Emily looked at the email 3 times when no one was watching. We left nothing but chalk and the faint smell of my mother's egg filling in the air. Emily dropped a thank you note at the security desk with a Tupperware of brownies I didn't see her bake, signed the realm, and somehow got a smile out of Buzz Cut. He lifted the note, read it, and said, "To no one, Her Majesty runs a tight ship." The next morning I woke up to the realm blowing up my phone. Someone, Molly, had drawn a tiny crown on a hospital parking stub and taped it to the golden plate like a passport stamp. There was a photo of Grandpa and Grandma at their kitchen table, calendar spread, pen in his hand, tiara askew. The caption from Molly, Royal Rehearsal 2, the autumn edition will be wherever the night watch says the air is kind. Prime Minister is scouting venues with outlets and chairs that don't bite. Lord Rememberer, prepare contingencies. Bring the extra chair. Add one more plate. I put my new card in front of the plate and caught myself counting chairs in my head. Emily leaned over my shoulder and kissed my temple. Quartermaster of contingencies, huh? She said. Promotion by lightning and a parking garage. I told her I'd make a badge. She rolled her eyes and said, make two. And Molly, 5 seconds later somehow reading over our shoulders via sheer force of will, decreed in the chat, 2 badges approved. Also, Kara says the Tamales place is open late. Court adjourned until tacos. Update 6, Royal Rehearsal 2 never made it to a lake or a park or even a backyard. It went to the library and learned to whisper. The forecast turned petty and the lake house was booked, and by Tuesday the realm chat had devolved into people sending pictures of gray skies like they were auditioning for a vitamin D commercial. At 10:14 p.m., a text from Molly pinged, attire, cozy. Footwear, quiet. Volume, beneath shushing threshold. Court convenes Thursday, 7 p.m., North Branch Public Library, bring the golden plate. No food with a crunch factor. There was a photo of the plastic tiara perched on a marble bust of a long-dead city founder in the lobby, which meant she had already broken in. We walked into a library I swear I've been using all my life and saw it for the first time pretending to be a castle. Someone, Princess Maleficent Banana Hammock, first of her name and apparently now on a first-name basis with librarians, had draped battery-operated fairy lights down the ends of the stacks like vines. The cat standard was zip-tied to a coat rack that took its promotion seriously. A cluster of study carols had been pushed together into a long table, and in the middle sat the tiara on a stack of Nancy Drews like it had read them all and approved. There were paper leaves scattered everywhere, each one stamped with a crown, and a sign at the reference desk that just said Quiet Court in Session, which is a sentence I didn't know I needed until it existed. The head librarian was in the corner, arms folded, watching us with an expression I recognized from my grandmother when someone cleans something the right way. After hours, she said in a stage whisper, when I went to thank her, "Your cousin brought me deviled eggs and a binder of rules. I like a girl who can cite her sources." Emily lifted her Prime Minister binder and laughed without making a sound. The librarian put a finger to her lips. "It's very important we pretend to whisper even when we aren't," she whispered. Molly tapped the wooden spoon against a mason jar and it made the gentlest, funniest sound. "By decree, court is now in session," she said softly, which somehow made every head turn faster than if she'd shouted. "Place cards again." My grandfather was Lord of Large Print. Grandma got Keeper of Renewals. Emily's promotion was official. Prime Minister, with actual powers, was stamped in purple ink like it came from a government that had discovered snacks. Mine read, Lord Rememberer, Keeper of Extras, Warden of Weather Apps. I held the card up so she could see and she gave me a look that said, "You asked for this," and I absolutely had. Kara couldn't leave the hospital this time. She wheeled into the library on a screen taped to a rolling cart, a tablet and a plastic stand with a headlamp strapped around it, the beam bouncing comically off the ceiling tiles. Maria, the Duchess of 10-minute breaks, leaned into frame long enough to wave with the solemnity of a parade marshal and then dissolved back into fluorescent light. The head librarian took one look at the cart, nodded and said, "We have embraced technology," like we had just told her the printing press was cool. Tamales appeared like a magic trick that smelled like cumin. Emily handed them out in napkins, and my mother used her church mouse voice to ask for extra salsa. No crunch, per decree. Uncle Tom tried to hustle for Avalon and Molly didn't even look up. "Library rules," she said. "No lying out loud. Deception must be conducted via eyebrows and interpretive nods." He attempted a practice lie with his eyebrows and looked like he'd spotted a bee. We all nodded interpretively that he had not. The first order of business wasn't on any agenda. Grandpa stood, the kind of careful stand that happens when your knees have opinions, and lifted the whistle he'd reclaimed after the roof. "Rehearsal." He set it on the table next to the golden plate and the tiara and laid his hand on the paper leaves. "We used to say, meet at the dock when the porch light goes on," he said, in a voice that belonged in a room with books. "Consider this the porch light." He looked at Grandma, and they looked at each other for a long time with faces that had learned shorthand in another decade. He cleared his throat and did not actually look at me or Molly. "We'd like to practice," he said. "We'd like to rehearse saying it again." It didn't click until the head librarian materialized with a small handbell and a smile that could get away with anything. Emily reached into her binder and produced 2 ancient library card sleeves, the old ones with the little pockets you slide a borrower's slip into. "Molly, with that exact same exaggerated solemnity she uses to knight people with plastic forks, slid them onto my grandparents' ring fingers like they were the rarest metals on earth. By order of Her Majesty, she said, the realm recognizes a vow when it knows one. There was no clergy and no paperwork, just the smell of old paper and somebody's lavender hand cream, and my grandparents saying the same thing they meant the first time with better grammar and fewer nerves. Grandma cupped Grandpa's face and said, I do, and I will, and then, because she can't actually help herself, she added, as long as you don't dog-ear my pages, and the librarian clutched her chest and had to turn away like she needed to collect herself behind the biographies. Grandpa slid the whistle across the table, tapped it gently twice like knocking on a door, and said, I still steer, but I like the navigator, which should be inscribed somewhere, maybe on the inside of every teenager's skull. We ate quietly loud tamales and somebody's apple cake that tasted like October. The Polaroid came out of Grandpa's tote bag like it lives there now. The picture developed with the tiara and the golden plate and 2 library card rings in soft focus. Molly shook it once and, on the back, wrote, for when the vows need bookmarks. We still had to play something because new laws require play. Silent Avalon is chaos even when you're good at it. With library rules and a court that includes a tablet on a rolling cart, it turned into an interpretive dance. Molly dealt cards with the flair of a dealer who's also a judge. Remember, she said in a murmur, no spoken betrayal. Emily and I were on opposite sides and she told 8 truths with her eyebrows and only lied once with a shrug so slight I had to replay it in my head. Uncle Tom tried to signal that he was definitely not Merlin by staring intently at the shelf labeled mysteries, which made the head librarian laugh into her sleeve in a way that made me very sure we were always welcome back. Kara, on the screen, took down a whole mission with a tilt of the head that read as I was born at night but not last night even through hospital Wi-Fi. When we counted successes and fails, Molly knocked on the table twice with the wooden spoon and then, without ceremony, slid a small sticker across to me. It was a library card stamp that said Crown Member. I popped it onto the back of the golden plate like a passport stamp and felt ridiculous and absolutely correct. Somewhere between the second plate of tamales and my mother committing a misdemeanor by shushing Uncle Tom, Molly opened her bag and pulled out a thin, plastic rectangle and set it on the table next to the shoebox of photos. It was a student ID, fresh lemonade shine, picture of her making the face people make when they are being forced to be official. By the way, she said, almost offhand. Her Majesty is taking a class. Knights. Design basics. I forgot I like rooms where you're supposed to learn stuff. She didn't look around to see who heard. She looked down at the ID and played with the lanyard like it might decide to fly away. My grandmother breathed in like a question got answered she hadn't wanted to ask out loud. The head librarian handed Molly a form with a flourish like a sword. Adjunct privileges, she said. Study room 4 on Tuesdays is no longer a democracy. Emily slid a highlighter across the table to me without looking. I found a blank section on the back of the charter we'd been scribbling on scraps and wrote, under Molly's terrible crown drawing, standing order, study night. Include everyone who wants to learn. Snacks cannot make the pages greasy. I underlined learn. Molly picked up the marker and added, very small, Prime Minister holds veto power over raisins, again and forever, because some fights are eternal. At one point, the security guard did the slow stroll past the glass doors, purely because that's his job, and caught sight of the cat banner looming over a stack of encyclopedias like an unhinged librarian's dream. He raised his eyebrows. Molly raised hers back in perfect legal deception. He lifted 2 fingers in a peace sign. She knighted him 3 inches with the wooden spoon, air only, and he kept walking. Before we left, Grandpa stood again, as if the room had taken something from him he wanted to give back. He didn't make a speech. He reached into the shoebox and pulled out a yellowed checkout card from a book stamped 1987, the kind with lines for names and dates, the ledger of who had borrowed what and when. He slid it under the elastic band around the shoebox and patted it like a sleeping dog. Proof, he said. We were here. Then he looked at me, and maybe it was the lights, or the paper dust in the air, or the thing that happens when you see your people inside a place built to hold words, but it felt like someone had slid a new page into the book where my 17-year-old self once sat on a boathouse step and told a little girl he'd do better. On our way out, the head librarian stamped all our makeshift titles with a tiny crown symbol she produced from the depths of a cardigan like a magician with sensible shoes. Molly slipped a card into my pocket I didn't notice until we were under the streetlight. It said, Lord Rememberer, Keeper of Extras, Warden of Weather Apps, Steward of Study Snacks. On the back, she'd written, bring extra highlighters. Backup pens. One more chair. When we got home, I stood the golden plate on the shelf next to the wedding photo and the plate caught the lamplight and flashed a little crown. My phone buzzed. The Realm had posted a photo of my grandparents at their kitchen table again, calendar open, her with both library rings still on, him with the tiara crooked and a pen poised like it had a deadline. The caption from Molly was simple, by order of Her Majesty, Winter Court will convene wherever tea stays warm and the doors don't stick. Prime Minister to secure a room with good light. Lord Rememberer to bring blankets, spare chargers, 1 extra pair of reading glasses. Night watch sets the time. Consider yourselves, inconveniently and with terrible timing, loved.